Hello everybody, Ellie here for WhoCulture. Who would have thought that after season 1 ended that we'd still have so much to be talking about? So today what I want to talk about is the latest report from Deadline, which is basically assessing how successful Doctor Who Season 1 was around the world. Now, before I do go into this any further, there are a few things in this report that maybe make me question its overall validity. For example, it says that Doctor Who now has a budget of £10 million per episode, but this is something that was actually debunked by Russell T Davies last year. So whether or not we can entirely trust this source, I'm not 100% sure, but this is Deadline. It is supposed to be one of the most trustworthy and reliable industry sources out there. So I wouldn't say it's unreasonable to take what is being said here as valid and true, but let's just be slightly wary moving forward with this discussion. So the first part of this report that I want to discuss is about the Disney Plus deal. So as we all now know, episodes of Doctor Who have streamed internationally on Disney Plus and exclusively on the BBC here in the UK. But according to Deadline, that deal is now actually in jeopardy because of one thing. Surprise, surprise, viewing figures. So here's what the report says up front. Noises that it may not last beyond its initial 2 seasons are already reverberating around international TV circles, and one source close to the production tells us that they feel its future hangs in the balance already. On the ratings specifically, it then goes on to say, Doctor Who was the most in-demand UK originating show with US audiences during its early release. It reached a high of 7th on Disney Plus's list of most in-demand series, trailing the likes of The Simpsons and the Star Wars offshoots. A senior US rating source positions these figures as underwhelming, although they acknowledge Doctor Who has long struggled attracting mainstream audiences in the US. Okay, but not stellar, was the simple verdict from a Disney insider about the internal view on its performance. There's also mention in this report that Disney wasn't thrilled with the UK ratings either, and they cite an industry source who describes those figures as a problem. The thing is, there are plenty of other factors at play here as well. Now, I heard through the grapevine just a few weeks ago that Disney actually wasn't that happy with the BBC and Bad Wolf Studios for sharing a sneak peek of Season 2 and the Christmas special in the latest episode of Unleashed, because Disney actually had the rights to that for San Diego Comic-Con coming up next weekend. So, oopsie there. Again, that's just through the grapevine. Who knows how much truth there is to that, but you can see that maybe Disney wouldn't be too impressed if they thought they had first dibs on something and then they saw it released beforehand. But let's just go back to those US ratings for a second. Now, to me, seems a little bit like Disney expected way too much. Doctor Who reached a high of 7th on Disney Plus's list of most in-demand series, trailing the likes of The Simpsons and the Star Wars offshoots. How is being 7th in an overall Disney Plus chart a bad thing? I don't understand how that can be considered a bad result. I mean, what did they expect? They can't honestly have expected Doctor Who to surpass The Simpsons and Star Wars. Realistically, did they really expect that to happen? To me, that seems like a strong result for a new show on Disney Plus. 7th? You're in the top 10. Also, this idea that all of a sudden Doctor Who is going to storm America, I think is a little bit of a delusion as well. It's always been fairly niche to an American audience. I'm not saying there aren't American fans, by God, there are plenty of American fans of Doctor Who, but it's still quite a niche audience. Now, I do understand Disney put a lot of money and resources into this project, so they probably were expecting a little bit more out of it, but then again, we heard rumours last week that Doctor Who was considered a low-budget series from Disney, so I think maybe they just need to reevaluate their expectations with regards to Doctor Who just slightly. Also, just as a random aside here, but something that is probably worth considering, Disney, if you really want the show to explode on Disney Plus and be a success on Disney Plus, get the rest of Modern Who on Disney Plus. Get From Christopher Eccleston to Jodie Whittaker available to stream on Disney Plus. Now, I do understand that there probably are existing streaming deals going on with other people, but as soon as those deals expire, get on that. If you could at least have the rest of Modern Who on there, I think the interest in the new stuff will be much higher. because they can catch up and have a bit better understanding of what it is that they're going into, see what came before and why it's so popular, rather than just being thrown in at the deep end with a season that, for better or worse, did have a lot of changes made that might have confused new viewers. Now, the other thing I've seen off the back of this report is a lot of people throwing around the C word. No, not that C word. Get your minds out of the gutter. Cancellation. Cancellation. What I would say to that is, let's just take a breath. Let's just all calm down for a moment here. This is one report. Now, the first thing we do need to consider is the weird thing about this report is, yes, it seems very doom and gloom when you're reading it, but there's zero mention of any major behind-the-scenes problems here. There's no drama, nothing like that. This is literally just ratings chatter. We're just talking about the ratings here. Then there are a few quotes from some random industry sources who are themselves only speculating on what they think the ratings mean and whether that might cause a problem. But that doesn't necessarily jive with what Disney's internal view is of the situation. And actually, if we even look a little bit further, one of the only times that we actually do have the report citing someone close to Disney is when they have a Disney insider calling the US ratings okay, but not stellar. I mean, it hardly seems like the sky is falling down, does it? I mean, okay, it didn't set the world on fire, but it did fine, okay, and now we move into season 2 and we go again and see what happens. They didn't say it was a disaster, they just said it was okay, but not great. That's okay, we can work with that. And also, let's not forget that even if Disney does pull out, that doesn't spell the end for Doctor Who necessarily. The BBC would still be free to find another streaming partner. Netflix, for example, we've had the similar situation quite recently with Star Trek, where Paramount Plus decided to let go of Star Trek Prodigy, and it got shopped around and Netflix picked it up, and it's been a raving success over on Netflix. Or, why do they need to shop around to a streamer? Just go back to doing it themselves like they always have done up until this point. Now, when you consider that this is probably their most valuable show with young viewers and makes them so much money in terms of merchandise and licensing as well, I would be extremely shocked if the show was just full on cancelled if Disney no longer backs it. And actually, Deadline's report is also unsure about what that would mean for the future of Doctor Who. This is what it says. Sources are split on the extent to which Disney pulling out will harm the show's future. While it would no doubt be embarrassing, Doctor Who's mega budget increase is perhaps less noticeable on screen than first thought, one source says, positing that Disney tentpoles like The Mandalorian look far more expensive on screen. But another says it will be a disaster. Given that Disney has spent all of this money, the question becomes what the BBC will do if they pull out. Now, when you think about that, there is also a quote from Russell T Davies back from March 2024, where he basically says that if they suddenly had to go back to making Doctor Who on a normal BBC budget, then they would, quote, rally around to make it. He's also said in other interviews that if the Disney money did suddenly disappear, they'd still make the show, and that plans are in place for season 3 and beyond, although season 3 hasn't actually been greenlit as of yet. I think what's important to remember here is that Disney has no ownership over Doctor Who. It is still totally in the BBC's hands. Quite honestly, I would not be mad if we went back to filming in quarries and steel mills. To me, that's what makes Doctor Who. We didn't have this mega budget before, so I wouldn't be mad if that's what we end up going back to. Doctor Who has never been a success because it's had lots of money thrown at it. That's not what it's about, and I almost feel like the big budget here has kind of overshadowed what's the important elements of what Doctor Who is. The show didn't survive for 60 plus years because it had lots of money. It survived because it told good stories, and it was a form of escapism and thrust people into this wonderful world of science fiction and historical drama and wonderful characters. It literally had cardboard cutouts and foam sets at one point. We don't need this $1 million budget to make a great show, and I almost feel like that's clouded the perception of what this show needs to be at this point. I guess the question then is, can a show survive in the current climate of television if it doesn't have all of that money thrown at it? But if a show has managed to survive this long on a small budget, why shouldn't it be able to survive even longer? Don't get me wrong, the Disney money definitely did make this season look great. You could see where some of it had gone. But when you look at Boom, for example, they filmed it with all this high-tech LED screens and in a studio, I would have equally enjoyed the episode if they had gone and filmed it in a quarry. That wasn't what made the episode for me. So, would I miss the Disney money? Not necessarily. Would I miss the show if it ultimately couldn't be made anymore? Absolutely. Also, I think it would have been very foolish for the BBC to have entered into this deal with Disney and not have any contingency plans put in place. I'm fairly certain they have considered what it would look like to continue making Doctor Who without Disney's involvement. In reality, we just do not know what's going to happen until it happens. Overall, it does seem though like the show didn't achieve the heights that Disney were hoping for. So whether they choose to re-up or not, we'll just have to wait and see. I honestly don't know. So another section of this report talks about Disney needing to make a decision on the show by the end of the year, and that this could actually have an impact on Ncuti Gatwa's involvement going forward. So this is Deadline citing a source that's close to the production. This is what they say. Although the next season has wrapped, this source predicts the final episode has been left open-ended, with the possibility remaining that Gatwa could regenerate into his successor if he chooses to exit. Now, I'm going to admit, but between myself and Danny, we have had differing thoughts on what this possibly means. To Danny, he's like, how does that work? How do they end an episode open-ended like that? Are we just going to have no regeneration? Are we just going to suddenly have a new Doctor in the next series? Are we going to just have the Doctor flying off into the vortex? And then maybe they'll go back and have a regeneration? Is it going to end on a cliffhanger like Stolen Earth did? In my mind, I don't see an issue with them filming an open-ended finale. We've seen it before. I think they've probably left it in a position where reshoots can be made. If you think about Jodie Whittaker's regeneration, she filmed her part of the regeneration way before David Tennant then went to film his part of the regeneration. Now, I'm not saying that Ncuti Gatwa's filmed his regeneration, but if they've left it open-ended, it's probably left in a position where he can come in and film one and it would work with the story. But what is important to remember here and to note is that this source predicts. So basically they're just guessing, just like we are, and they could easily be way off the mark. Now, earlier this year, Ncuti Gatwa actually said that he's, quote, not going anywhere soon. Although, to be fair, I suppose, what's he meant to say? Of course, he's got to make assurances that he's sticking around even if he's not. I mean, that's PR 101. My biggest concern is if they don't make a decision quickly and he's not contractually obliged to a third season. He is massively up and coming as a star, and someone could easily swoop him up and take him to a new project if he's not tied down to Doctor Who. Which is not to say that he's not loving the role and wouldn't want to continue in the role, but if there's all this indecisiveness going on and no one can give him an answer as to whether the show is continuing or not, I don't think he'd hesitate to put his career first and go, well, if you're not going to give me a straight answer, then I've got X, Y, and Z over here lined up wanting me to be in their shows, in their films, their plays. I'm going to go for the career safety and go with them. So I think, yes, they do need to be wary of losing their star if they don't come up with an answer quickly. Personally, I don't see him sticking around for only 2 seasons unless he's forced to leave for some reason. I do get the impression that he does love playing the Doctor and he does want to stick around for a lot longer. But like I said, I think external circumstances may force his hand rather than him deciding to step away. So let's hope they hurry up and make a decision soon. Now, ultimately, as with a lot of this report, it's all speculative at the moment. We don't actually know. We do not truly know what is happening behind closed doors at this moment in time with regards to Doctor Who. We don't know what's going to happen until it happens, as I said earlier. Now, we do have San Diego Comic-Con next weekend, so we're bound to get some sort of news then. And who knows if we're going to get a season 3 or not. One thing I will say, when we keep referring to a season 3, I've got on board with calling this latest season season 1. It took me a while to get used to this new numbering, but it's natural for me to say now. And I understand why they did do that in terms of bringing in a new audience without it being too daunting. But I do wonder, in terms of Disney's point of view, whether the fact that it's just being referred to as season 1, do we want a season 3, makes it almost seems like they've forgotten that this is a show that's been running for 60 plus years, has a real longevity to it. When you say, oh, who knows if they're going to renew it for a third season, it almost feels like Disney are approaching it as an entirely new project. And although to Disney it is an entirely new project, This is a show that has been running for 60 plus years. And the fact that you've taken away that numbering system that reminds people of that, and then you're looking at it as, do we want to renew this project this new project to us that we've experimented with, almost downplays how much of an impact this show has made and how this show has managed to survive for so long. So as much as I don't mind that they've changed the numbering system, it made sense in the grander scheme of things. I think in terms of when they're talking about renewing it, it kind of diminishes the fact that this show has managed to survive for so long, and it seems like they're just treating it like this new project that they can just scrap because it didn't work, and I don't like that. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. What do you think? I know a lot of you said right from the beginning that this Disney Plus deal was going to not end well. We liked to look on the bright side of it. Are we now seeing that perhaps we were a little bit too hopeful? Maybe. Let me know in the comments down below. In the meantime, I've been Ellie for WhoCulture, and in the words of River Song herself, goodbye, sweeties.